Hi everyone. So now that I've introduced myself and I've introduced the topic, I'd like to go ahead and start with a brief-ish history of the research that's been done in this field, beginning in the 18th and 19th century. So in the 18th century, there was a large increase in the need for research in this field due to two reasons. So the first reason being that their horses were still largely used in war, and there was an incredible amount of equine loss of life during these wars that were being fought. So people needed a better way to care for these injured animals. And the second reason, and perhaps slightly more profound, is this age was also the age of enlightenment that was sort of brewing and taking off in France and spreading like wildfire. And so the Enlightenment essentially caused a deeper interest in this field as well as many other intellectual fields. And so people saw a lot more knowledge and started doing a lot more research. In 1761 was when the first veterinary school opened in France. And after that, other European countries really started following the French example. So in 1779, the first modern work on equine gait analysis was published from the Alfort Veterinary Center in France. Locomotion investigations were being done in Switzerland as well. There was actually a book published in Switzerland by the title Theoretical and Practical Handbook of the Conformation of the Horse and Horse Grooming and Care. Of course, this is a translated title, but essentially the work detailed a number of conformation variations that could impact the horse's performance, whether it be work-related performance or sport-related performance. That is up to interpretation. Meanwhile, in Germany, there was increasing interest in equine locomotion as it related more specifically to muscle action. In Austria, work was being done on the hoof as a mechanism of locomotion. And so essentially it just kept spreading and spreading, and all throughout the 18th and early 19th century, theories and a little bit of experimental data were being collected and tested. However important that initial kickstart to the interest in this field it was probably more in the 19th century that any serious advances were really made in this field in terms of data collection and proof for these theories that began developing. In 1882, Bayer, the leading Austrian researcher in the field of equine mechanics, developed this electrical device that measured lateral movement in the hoof wall as the hoof struck the ground. But even more importantly, it was probably the invention of the motion picture that truly changed the study of gaits forever. In 1872, Leland Stanford, a businessman and racehorse trainer and owner, hired a man named Edward Muybridge to do some photographic studies on his horse. And the question that these two men were really trying to answer was whether or not all 4 feet of a horse were off the ground at the same time in the gallop. Muybridge's moving pictures ultimately proved that the horse did in fact have all of its legs off the ground at one time, but this occurred when the legs were tucked under the horse's body, contrary to the depictions of artists of the day who showed the legs of the horses fully extended in forwards and back off the ground at the same time. So that initial depiction was incorrect, and I believe we've talked about that a little bit already in this course. Another technological breakthrough occurred in the same time period due to the French physiologist E.J. Maury, who thought that studying locomotion could lead to breakthroughs in mechanical engineering. So this is related a little bit to that idea of the perfection in biology being replicated in man-made machines, sort of goes along with this idea of the Industrial Revolution. So that's important to put into context in history. So Maury focused on differentiating between the stance and the swing phase of the equine gait. And to do this, he created a device called the exploratory shoe. Of course, again, translated into English. The exploratory shoe contained an elastic ball connected to an electrical recording device, which detected limb placement of the horse throughout each phase of the gait. the largest takeaway from Mari's work is this. So first he demonstrated that there was in fact a period of brief suspension in the trot, as well as the gallop, like we talked about with Muybridge's work. And secondly, he deduced that the hindquarters of the horse took care of most of the propulsion in the horse's gaits, while the forequarters provided mostly support. And in a later video that will be introduced in the lecture, you'll be able to see a dissection of a horse, and you can see the difference in musculature of the hind end and the front end, and basically how this musculature would work in the horse's favor. So we'll continue more about the history of this research in the next set of slides.